Hello, welcome to CLSP Politics. Sean Briscoe speaking. So apparently we've decided to do a bomb Iran. So I thought we could talk about what does that look like for US politics. So I've got a two-parter here. This part's more of a historical context, so we understand how previous wars have affected other midterm elections. I even go into a couple of presidential cycles, but it's important that we understand what we're looking for, especially if you're running for office. So uh, we need to understand what are the dynamics and how some of this works out, and some of this will be pretty well, duh, and some of it will be like okay, because they actually feed off each other, and it's important to understand how all that works. So let's start from World War II because going back to Spanish American War just seems a little bit too much. So this will be modern times. Anyway, so you've got World War II, 1944. During the war, it was an incumbent landslide, and FDR was president, right? So you had all of the midterm electeds just dominating. Whoever was in power stayed in power. The Korean War, uh, this was when the incumbent, party lost the White House, and it was pretty much it was pretty bad. Vietnam, not great. I mean, president had to withdraw, party collapsed, Republicans doing what they do, got us into a crappy war with absolutely no way out. Uh, Gulf War. Now we're getting into eras that I remember. So, oh man, in 91, I was living overseas. Um, and, you know, the Gulf War was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was days long, 45, I think. I don't, that. No, it was 12, right? It was a really short time period. Bush the first got in, got out because he understood if you break it, you buy it. And, you know, he'd been in World War II. He understood how this operation actually works. Um, so there was no lasting benefit to the political environment, and mostly it was the economy stupid at that point, right? Um, so the Iraq War in 2002, decade later, uh, early success, right? Desert Storm, all that, but there was a huge rollout, lots of media. Like we learned about all the new toys the military had and how we just really walked in there and just blew up T-52 tanks all day. And yeah, it was all butt kicking and whooping butt and America. And the president's party did pretty good. And 4 years later, things got a little rough. Massive backlash. Didn't really reach Texas all that much. I was working congressional races up in North Texas at this point, and but there was a huge, massive backlash. Bush lost both houses, and 2 years later, Obama gets elected. All pretty much because of the prolonged conflict of the Iraq War. Uh, so then we've got 2004 was the Afghanistan Iraq War, and I put these out of order because of their one's a midterm, one's a presidential. Of course, Bush got reelected, but it was by the narrowest of margin. One might even say the Supreme Court gave it to him. So interesting. So basically, the historical rules are, you know, early game, incumbents are helped. Late game, not so much. So this war in Iran just started. We're, days out from the beginning. It's expanding. We've got other countries jumping in, which is always exciting. And yeah, what are the likely effects of the 20 on these primaries that we're walking into? Part two will go into this a lot more because I kind of break it down, but there are basically three factions will emerge in the Democratic Party. Some of us have seen this before. This is actually played out a couple times. Like I said, some of these movies have happened before, and we have all watched this, right? So the first one is the National Security Democrat, right? These guys do well early. A lot of them are incumbents. A lot of them are in states with a lot of military, and they'll, you know, emphasize alliances, which we have none except for Israel, so that's a problem. Uh, they'll gain older voters and suburban moderates. Um, there's an argument to be made that those guys have been lost, but for other reasons. But in a bubble, they would gain these, and as long as it's a short conflict, and I guarantee you it's not going to be, and there are no repercussions, which we've already had in the country. So we've already got shootings, and now that one in Austin looks pretty rough. This is going to continue to play out. Then you have the anti-escalation progressives. They're my people, my opinion. Civilian casualties dominate the news. That's a problem. That's when these guys will gain a lot of foothold. If we put boots on the ground in Iran, that's a big one. Game over. And you'll see the youth, those very boots that they want to put on the ground. God help them if they implement a draft. That's all I have to say. And then you have economic populists. If it's award-driven inflation, then shifts the debate back to cost of living, goes right back to kitchen table pocketbook, and then you got a real problem on your hands if you're an economic populist. They'll do better because they're going to be like, why are we spending money on these foreign wars when we don't have working, infrastructure, bridges, especially if you have like a major infrastructure collapse, like a bridge, or this winter the power goes out, things like that. People are going to go, why are we spending money in Iran again? How much did we spend? Yeah. So the primary impact, as far as like what it looks like, is you can see that really it's not a good history. Basically, by Trump doing this is a huge mistake, because now these Republicans have to go back in their home districts and explain what the hell's going on. And especially since they ran on no foreign intervention. And let's get this straight. So far, we have threatened every country in the world with economic sanctions. We have kidnapped a leader from Venezuela. And now we have bombed Iran. And Trump's saying that we're going to have to put boots on the ground. So, things that we're going to see. They're going to go, if you vote Republican, you're somehow more American than if you vote Democrat. That's going to be a thing. We're going to see a turnout of high information voters. That does not help the Republicans. Okay, high information, I guess, could be viewed as two different things. Bad information and good, accurate and lies, whatever. So both those groups are going to come out. We're going to definitely have a splitting ideologically in a very big way. And the two best cycles to look at as far as how this played out in the past is 2004 Democratic primary, and then I would say the 1968 Democratic fragment. That's an extreme case, but when that kind of blew up too. So you're going to see a lot of really interesting dynamics. So the cities that are going to have to basically pay for this war, because they're the economic engines of this country, are going to react poorly. to put it mildly. And then you've got the rural vote, whom I'll be honest is where a lot of the military comes from. It's like the inner city poor and then the rural. And that's going to have a problem because the rural community has been losing population for decades now. This is not going to help. Now it's the Democrats, right? Republican. This is the Republican dynamic. They're going to, of course, wrap themselves in the American flag, as they love to do, and they will take a lot of pro-military positioning, which they love to do, even though they're the ones who start all these wars. It's like 9 out of the last 10. Come on. I mean, they're gonna, the primary voters are gonna reward the hawkish position, wrap themselves in the American flag, all that stuff. So in Texas, it'll be interesting. This happened yesterday, and we only have one more day left for voting on Tuesday. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. I guarantee you they're making commercials today. You'll get an emerging split, which is what we've seen, right? The traditional hawks for military intervention. Then you've got the economic guys, the America First anti-interventionist wing, which is really old Republicans versus MAGA. Because MAGA, in theory, is the America First anti-interventionist wing of the GOP, right? I mean, it's weird because that's what they run on, but then their great leader decides not to do that. It's very, very strange. So you're going to have a lot of Republicans saying we don't need another Iraq. You're going to have a lot of veterans are running this cycle, and I'm almost 100% sure they don't want another Iraq because they were there. And then, you're going to have a whole bunch of candidates running on, the strength of the American military. And yeah, so general election effects, which will be interesting. There are 3 major measurable channels that affect the general election. This is when Democrats versus Republicans. So we just looked at the primaries. This is what the Democrat versus, and it's basically approval rating of the president. You have the economy, and then you have the duration of the war. Those are the 3 big ones. So let's talk about approval rating and how it affects the down ballot impact. So we're already seeing this, right? I think the Democrats going to take at least 18 seats, and that was before we decided to blow up Iran. I think we're probably going to take more now. Trump's approval ratings garbage. It got a bump during the State of the Union, but still underwater. If the incumbent party, gains approval, they're looking at a 2 to 4 point national. But that means he's over 50%. Trump doesn't do over 50% very well, never has. So that's not really going to be a thing. So, I mean, in theory, yes, this makes sense. But applied to today's world, I just don't see Trump having any. I mean, the fact that he's not on the ballot means that the Republicans lose 3 points off the top. That's why you saw, like in Wisconsin, last presidential cycle, the president won, but so did the Democratic statewide U.S. Senate candidate. And it's because MAGA goes in, they vote Trump, and they walk out. And all you need is 2 or 3% of them to do that. And that's game. That's how you had a 0.5 point loss by Kamala in Wisconsin, but every Democrat won below her. And it's because MAGA will go in and vote Trump and walk out. Well, there's no Trump to vote for this cycle. So that's a real problem. And if his numbers were better, there'd be they might actually gain seats in the Senate. Not likely right now. And then, if his numbers are really good, you'd have reduced midterm style turnout drop. Well, has anyone watched the primaries so far? They're all like 200%. We're even just in the first ones, and they're already 200% of normal turnout. So yeah, if his approval falls, you have the reverse effect, which is where we're at, really, but amplified. So all of what I just said, but the reverse, but more. So it's not going to be good. Number 2 is economic transmission. This is the most important one. This is the kitchen table stuff. And so the foreign affairs is not what people actually vote on in America, which is unfortunate because, man, most of our problems are because of our foreign affairs. And so most of the debt that we've incurred in our deficit is because of a military that you have to have when you're kind of bullying the planet. I mean, we did some other stuff that was really good for a planet. Like we maintained maritime safety for 40 years with our Navy that was left over from World War II. All those cruisers out there were maintaining, shipping, which allowed, huge economic explosions all over the planet. So that was, and we paid for that. That was what the U.S. taxpayer paid for. You're welcome, planet, I guess. Anyway, so the war effect. So I'm going to blow this up so you guys can read a little easier. Basically, if the oil prices spike, incumbent party loses support. Incumbent party is already losing support, and the oil prices literally just went up yesterday because of Hormuz and all that. It's not 20% of the oil flows right past Iran. It's not that Iran produces all that much oil anymore. It's that it's part of the bottleneck of 1 in 5 barrels that are produced in the world go through right next to Iran. So that's your first problem. And the thing is, it costs money to move stuff. So as stuff gets more expensive to move, inflation's going to rise even more. And voters tend to punish the governing party for inflation. And we saw that with Biden. And then, and even though that wasn't war related necessarily, it was inflation. We're already seeing the impact it can have on elections. And then market instability. And that's when you lose all the moderate and independent. They don't actually care about much. They do care about their portfolio. And once you mess with their portfolio, that's kind of game over in their business. That's not how things are supposed to work. And a good example is in 1991, the Gulf victory did not save Bush because in 1992, we had a recession. Yeah. And actually, that recession started before 92. It was like, just the whole period there, which wasn't, there were a lot of impacts. There was a lot of things impacting that environment. But, economic perception beats military success almost every time because, I think the only example I have that isn't the case, we were directly attacked in Pearl Harbor and then in 9/11. So that's it. So, what, Trump now has to pray for something terrible to happen on the homeland? Bad look. 3, casualties and duration. So political tolerance thresholds historically are not great when it comes to these two. If you know where and then this isn't even 100%, right? Because technically the first Bush, when he went in there with Desert Storm, got in, got out, low casualties, clear objective, and it was politically sustainable, but the economy kind of came in from behind and just whooped his butt. And then the other scenario, of course, is rising casualties an unclear goal uh, leads to rapid opinion collapses. And I honestly think that's what we're looking at, because no one can tell me what part two of this Iran thing is. So, I mean, case in point, Trump told all of the soldiers in Iran to put down their guns and surrender. To whom and where? Right? So, what we've seen in the past, when we saw in Iraq, was when the second war, we went through, didn't secure any of the weapons locations, and ended up, they ended up stealing all those weapons and using them for, um, ambush explosive devices aimed at our soldiers. We go into Iran, 100 times worse. It's going to be brutal, and we can expect both rising casualties and with an unclear exit strategy, which they do not have one. I haven't seen one. No one's heard one. I tried to listen to that Trump thing. I ended up just reading the write up on it because I hate his voice. It gives me a headache now. So yeah, I just read the transcript. Anyway, he's got, it says 6 to 12 months, and that's in like a normal cycle. But since he's sitting in the mid 30s on approval rating, I give this more like 6 to 12 days. I don't give it months at all. Maybe weeks. Maybe he's got a month and a half, maybe 3 months. But by May and June, when we see what, 25, like I think between like mid-May and mid-June, you've got 25 of the 50 primaries happening. This all better be sorted out by then, because those primaries are going to be brutal. Like, there will be an incumbent bloodletting in the Republican Party. And it'll be, it's not like they're going to get replaced by anything any better on the other side, but now they're going to have a bunch of radical right-wing nut jobs. I mean, not to say they don't have that already, but they're going to be even more so. And that's going to be harder to sell to a general election population. And that's going to be the rub. And I think that overall, it's going to be rough for the Republican Party, because this administration's proven over and over again it can't really do anything right at all. And it's pretty much because they fired anyone who actually knew anything, because these guys don't. So my feeling is that it's going to be a very rough cycle. So this is only part one. I'm doing part two of this as an overview of the entire look at Iran and its impact on politics here in America. But well, anyway, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. If you want to support the work I do on this channel, you can go to my YouTube. I have a PayPal, and it's also a QR code for PayPal. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Substack. You can join my Substack. All right, everyone, keep your eyes open for part two. It is coming. All right, talk to you guys later.